What if I told you that one man's systematic approach to business became so dominant that the US government had to rewrite the rules of capitalism itself to stop him? His name was John D. Rockefeller, the architect of America's first great monopoly, who didn't just build a business empire. He engineered a decision making system so ruthlessly effective that it controlled 90% of America's oil refining capacity and created the template for modern corporate strategy. While his competitors fought price wars and burned cash, Rockefeller operated with mental models that turn chaos into calculated dominance. This isn't just the story of America's first billionaire. This is about a mind that saw patterns where others saw problems, identified inefficiencies as opportunities, and built systems that could scale beyond any individual's limitations. Rockefeller didn't just drill for oil. He revolutionized vertical integration, supply chain optimization, and strategic cost management in ways that modern business schools still study today. So from 1000 investment in Cleveland oil refinery, Rockefeller's framework around systematic growth, competitor analysis, and operational efficiency created Standard Oil, a machine so powerful that it reshaped the global economy. His approach to negotiation, partnership structures, and market consolidation established principles that built the foundation of modern corporate America. So, this is what you're going to discover: the exact mental models that Rockefeller used to identify and exploit market inefficiencies that competitors couldn't even see. His systematic approach to competitor acquisition that turned rivals into assets. His decision making framework that helped him navigate the tension between ruthless business tactics and long term reputation management. And the strategic thinking patterns that enabled him to build systems that operated independently of his personal involvement. So by the end of this episode, you'll possess you will possess the mental frameworks that created America's first corporate empire, models that will transform how you think about market domination, operational excellence, and building business that become too powerful to ignore. Because understanding how Rockefeller's mind worked isn't just a business history, it's a masterclass in systematic thinking that can turn any industry into your personal kingdom. So first, let's gonna start off with his core principles and values: thrift, self-reliance, hard work, and unflagging enterprise. Rockefeller embodied these virtues of the capitalist revolution. He learned the bourgeois virtues from his mother Eliza, which were central to his success at Standard Oil. His orderly nature also reflected a need to govern potentially unruly emotions, a reaction to his disorderly father in childhood. From his father, he learned the necessity and importance of keeping meticulous accounts, which was crucial due to his family precarious financial situation. He paid his debts punctually and believed implicitly in the sacredness of contracts, taking great pains to write them clearly and carefully. This training from his father proved invaluable throughout his life. Rockefeller was also deeply drawn to the Baptist Church, seeing it was refreshing to the soul and a guide in mundane affairs. He believed the power to make money was a gift from God to be developed and used for the good of mankind, seeing himself as God's instrument and temporary trustee of his money. This belief in stewardship and early commitment to charity may have given him an inner license to pursue wealth with unparalleled vigor. He even referred to Standard Oil using religious imagery such as angel of mercy, Moses delivering refiners from the folly. He rigorously scrutinized his daily activities and regulated his desires, hoping to banish spontaneity. He trained himself to control his ugly temper and aimed never to be guided by ego. Gandhi frequently engaged in intimate conversations with himself, fearing that prosperity might make him puffed up. Now, what is John D. Rockefeller's approach and a mental model when it comes to hiring? Well, personal involvement in the early years of Standard Oil. Gandhi personally attended to routine hiring, seeking out talented people, whether immediately needed or not. He famously stated that the ability to deal with people is a purchasable commodity as sugar or coffee. So he values social skills. And he paid more for this ability than any other. Testing and delegation. He exhaustively tested employees. But once he trusted them, he bestowed enormous power and avoided intrusion unless something radically misfired. He believed in a sink or swim method for developing workers, recalling a tactic his father used. His policy was to train subordinates to do your job so you could focus on broader policy. He emphasized on numeracy. He valued an attitude for math in subordinates, like hiring his secretary, George D. Rogers, after testing his speed in totaling figures. Now, decision making framework. He was deliberate and cautious. Right? John D. Rockefeller was known for being slow in deliberations and particularly in negotiations. When playing checkers or chess, he showed exceptional caution, studying each move and working out every possible countermove. His mother's frequent ad- admonition, "We will let it simmer," was a saying he employed throughout his business career, indicating a preference for cool reflection before action. He would brood over problems and quietly mature plans over extended periods, never tipping off his adversaries. He was data driven. He had almost a mystic faith in numbers and regarded ledgers as sacred books that guided his decisions and saved one from the fallible emotions. He believed numbers rooted things in solid empirical reality and prided himself on knowing when operations were profitable. He charted his course by figures, using them as an objective yardstick to compare far flung operations and cut through false claims from subordinates. He was decisive in action, that is, after the deliberation. So, despite his slow and ponderous style, once his plan of action was thorough mulled over, he had the power of quick decisions. Once his mind was made up, he was no longer troubled by doubts and pursued his vision with undeviating faith, acting like a projectile that could not be stopped. Now, he placed, John D placed a premium on internal harmony, canvassing everyone's opinion before expressing his own and often crafting compromises. He always couched his decisions as suggestions or questions and operated by consensus, taking no major initiatives opposed by board members. This ensured thorough planning and few missteps. Now, his strategic vision was he started thinking in terms of systematic solutions and strategic alliance, viewing the industry as a gigantic mechanism. He had a talent for seeing things anew, breaking down operations into component parts and devising ways to improve them, just like Elon Musk. Now, what is his how does he handle mistakes, failures, and how does he pivot? Well, there was one scenario where there was industry chaos and consolidation. John D. Rockefeller saw the oil business in confusion and daily growing worse. He stated that Standard Oil's genesis was forced upon us in a desperate spirit of self preservation and believe the day of combination is here to stay and individualism has gone, never to return. This led him to unify the industry, understand that Standard Oil, viewing it as a heroic act of salvation. Now, he claimed that he knew that SIC, Self Improvement Company, would fail and went along with only as a tactical maneuver to later propose Standard Oil's plan. He asserted that the scheme never bothered his conscience and was right before me and my God. This shows a strong self justification mechanism where he couldn't tolerate doubts about his career. Now, how would he confront opposition? John Dee believed that his actions would initially be resisted and misunderstood by the crowd, but the force and the truth of his ideas would triumph. Leadership style. He was quiet, unassuming presence. People described him as having soundless movements and modulated voice of an undertaker, often materializing quietly at desk. Despite his deep reserve, he had a sublime self confidence that speaks with quiet authority. He was, Gandhi paid attention to the details. He was a perfectionist, alert to the tiniest detail in his refineries. He would carry a small red notebook to jot down suggestions for improvements, which inspired terror among plant superintendents. He would even ask about the number of solder drops used on each can to find inefficiencies or efficiencies. Now, how would he inspire loyalty? Employees tended to revere him, and he had a magnetic power over workers. He never used ferocity against his employees, who generally found him proper and paternally concerned. Now, with delegation and trust, John D. Rockefeller delegated enormous power to trusted executives. The key word here is trusted executives, only intruding if something radically misfired. Now, when it comes to team collaboration, he fostered a spirit of cooperation and harmony, meeting daily with partners to thrash out problems. He viewed his colleagues as marshals essential to a Napoleon like success. Now, with the strategic management, he was an always monitoring with extraordinary reactive ability. And when presented with options, resembling modern chief executives. All right, if you haven't already, subscribe, like if you're enjoying this, because now we're moving on to the innovation tactics. Now, John D. Rockefeller did not waste byproducts. He was in his search for minor improvements. Okay, early on, he drew on to convert sulfuric acid residue into fertilizer, leading to many profitable attempts to create byproducts from waste. Standard Oil later expanded into wax, asphalt, lubricants, candles, dyes, paints, and industrial acids. Now, efficiency studies. He anticipated the efficiency studies of Frederick Winslow Taylor, treating each plant as infinitely perfectible and fostering an atmosphere of ceaseless improvement. The immense scale of his operation paradoxically, okay, encouraged close attention to minute details as small savings could be multiplied thousands of times. Now, he was very self-sufficient. Gandhi reacted to shortages by deciding to build his own copper shop for barrels and hiring plumbers by the month to manage cost and quality. That was good financial decision. Now, speaking on that topic, we'll move on to his financial strategy, which was capital accumulation. His hardest problem was always obtaining enough capital. He was extraordinarily adept at borrowing when needed. Now, he would leverage his character for credit. His reputation for exemplary character, especially among the Baptist executives, and his status as a church mainstaying helped him secure loans and a friendly reception at banks. Now, strategic borrowing. He used his father's willingness and crowd psychology in bargaining with banks. For example, if he wanted 5,000, he'd let it know that he wished to invest 10,000 to bolster his firm's credit. Then we get the 5,000. Now, with that profit reinvestment, he often prioritized plowing earnings back into the business over fatter dividends, leading to clashes with partners like Andrews. Market approach. He was obsessed with high volume, low cost production to maintain market share, even if it meant temporarily sacrificing profit margins. His aim was always to secure the largest percentage of the business. Investing discipline. He adhered to sacred investing rules, such as not disturbing his Standard Oil stock and maintaining a cash balance never below 10 million. That time, 10 million was a lot. He was born contrarian, buying in declining markets, selling in rising ones, and using an 8-point strategy. I bet you haven't heard of that one before. Well, now, partnership and networking, strategic recruitment. So, John assembled a stellar team of capable executives like Henry Flagler and John Archibald, who transformed his Cleveland refinery into a world leader. Business over friendship. He appreciated Flagler's friendship founded on business was superior to a business founded on friendship. Now, handling competitors. He generally preferred to talk earnestly to rivals and reason with them, offering Standard Oil stock and promising they would never know what they would want. But he often paid generously for strategic properties in mergers aiming to convert competitors into cartel members and retain original owners rather than resorting to naked intimidation. Now, his covering tracks. He developed a lifelong habit of covering his tracks and pretending to be elsewhere when critical decisions were made, attributing major deals like the landmark transportation pact to Flagler. He cultivated an elliptical style in the communication to avoid incriminating evidence and sidestep responsibility. Now, this is one of the most important one, which is his scaling mechanics. What is his decision-making framework and mental models when it comes to scaling mechanics? Well, first it was incremental expansion. His entry into the oil business was an incremental transition from produce. He built a second refinery that Standard Works, solidifying his position as the leading refiner in Cleveland. Then, consolidation and centralization. His plan was to unify the industry under Standard Oil, starting with local Cleveland refiners and then expanding. He strategically acquired key rivals to dismantle inefficient operations and demoralize independent competitors. He controlled logistics. He used a pipeline system to gain maximum advantage from both railroads and pipelines, tightening his grip on transportation. And the next step after that was organic growth and acquisitions. His success stemmed from both his work ethic and intelligence. He always aimed for something big. He was always a visionary from the outset of his job search. Now, branding and positioning. He controlled the narrative. Rockefeller positioned a Standard Oil as a benevolent force, an angel of mercy that saved the industry from chaos. He was indignant at charges of destroying competition, insisting it was a process of upbuilding and conservation. His public appearance initially, he largely ignored public opinion and refused interviews. However, facing political assaults, Standard Oil began to cooperate selectively with the press, with articles vetted by executives like Archibald. And then, when he did sit down for interviews, he came across as unfailingly dignified and courteous, modest, retiring, gentle manner. He was a very secret person. Secrecy and discretion. equated his silence with strength, believing weak men had loose tongues. That was his quote. Weak men had loose tongues. He maintained a highly guarded and secretive nature, often startling people by materializing silently at their desk. This was also a trait observed in his father. Now, his son's role in PR. John D. Rockefeller Jr., which is his son, became an instrumental in rehabilitating the family's public image, consciously working to counter the negative perceptions created by muckrakers like Tarbell, and Jr. acknowledged his role as a salesman to go between with the father at the opportune moment regarding philanthropy, customer acquisition, and retention strategy. So, personal salesmanship early in his career. John D. Rockefeller was a smoothly persuasive salesman who modestly outlined his firm's services rather than directly poaching clients. He quickly gained the confidence of old men in the country, leading to increased consignments and business. Vertical integration for control. Standard Oil sought out to eliminate independent middlemen, which were agents, who earned high commissions and mixed products. And intolerable situations for Rockefeller, he he exploit economies of scale, ensure high volume, low cost production. Rockefeller undertook vertically integrate the entire industry, controlling everything from wellhead to the consumer. Now, the revolutionary distribution system around 1882, the trust innovated by replacing traditional horse-drawn carts and barrels with thousands of tank wagons to service every American town. These wagons deliver refined oil to storage tanks, then to local groceries and hardware stores. In some instances, tank wagons even went door to door, selling directly to households. Market creation. Standard Oil actively created demand by selling heaters, stoves, lamps, and lanterns almost at cost to broaden the kerosene market. Its agents also assisted consumers by helping them clean up lamps and burners. Aggressive market control. Standard, okay? Oil's marketing subsidiaries were known for their controlled ferocity. Salesmen would trail competitors' wagons and undersell them if necessary. So, station managers were expected to command at least 85% of the oil trade in their district, a demanding standard that fueled aggressive tactics and price reduction, sometimes at a loss. They also spread substantial rumors to alarm customers of surviving independence. Now, the secretive operation of Standard Oil, utilized from companies such as the Boswick Company, purchasing an agency, and the Public Oil, a New York-based company, cultivating antitrust retailers, which outwardly appeared independent but were secretly controlled by Standard Oil. Territorial dominance by Rockefeller fiercely protected controlled marketing territories, swiftly acting halt even small incursions outside oil. The continent was divided into 11 marketing districts, with headquarters arbitrating disputes. Now, with the crisis management, financial downturns, Rockefeller saw opportunity in every disaster. That's how he handles crisis and disaster. So during 1873 and 1879 slump, Standard Oil maintained profitability, even wowing competitors by allowing them to inspect its books. In the 1893 panic, Rockefeller acted as a sovereign power, providing nearly 6 million in loans to 58 individuals and firms that banks had turned down. He also contributed to JP Morgan's 25 million fund to stabilize the stock during the market in 1907 panic, preventing numerous brokerage and bankruptcies. Now, there was a public scandal and legal challenges and denial and evasion. Rockefeller often feigned ignorance of controversial actions by subordinates and employed strange euphemisms and phrasing. And this would minimize what he revealed, even in private letters. He considered lawsuit against him as extortion rackets. Now, he controlled public relations initially, and Rockefeller and his colleagues ignored public opinion. However, there's always a press, media assaults. And by buying the newspaper, this is what, by buying the newspaper, hiring press bureau for favorable articles, and selectively cooperating with other periodicals, the tainted money controversy and the trust hired its first publicist. And that that move helped Rockefeller humanize his image. Now, with the legal adaptation to navigate restrictive state laws, this was a big part of expansion. Standard Oil constantly reconstituted itself into various forms, eventually adopting the holding company structure, enabled by 1889 New Jersey law as an escape hatch to operate nationwide. Now, now let's talk about John D. Rockefeller's negotiation style. He was calm and deliberate. Rockefeller was known for his iron poise and self-mastery, and remained calm even during high-stakes negotiation. He quietly matured plans over extended periods of time before acting. John was persistent and tenacious. He demonstrated bulldog tenacity in collecting debts, waiting pale and patient as an undertaker until debtors would give him what he wants. He was persuasive and rational. He preferred to talk earnestly to his rivals, tapping them on the knee or gesturing with his hands, reasoning with them in richly cadenced, evangelical tones. He focused on mutual advantage, crafting terms that solved problems for both parties. So, in the railroads or refineries, John also leveraged and was calculated intimidation. He used his commanding position and large scale to compel railroad freight concessions while he denied direct threats. The timing of his takeovers and terrifying rumors about the South Improvement Company created an atmosphere of well-timed intimidation. He would starve out competition and by buying all available barrels on the market or monopolize local tank cars. He had a do it first mentality. His partner, Flagler, his motto was do unto others as they would do unto you, and do it first. That suggested a proactive and aggressive approach to negotiations. John was secretive and evasive. He never tipped off his adversaries to his plans for revenge, preferring to spring his reprisals on them. In legal testimony, he could be vague and forgetful, giving fuzzy answers and avoiding bottom facts. He had an eerie gift for catching a subtle drift of prosecutors' questions. In strategic conciliation, despite ferocity, he preferred patience and reason where possible, especially when he wanted to retain original management after acquisitions. John preferred to convert competitors into members of his organization rather than resort to naked intimidation. Now, what is John's time management and prioritization? He was always strict with his schedule, valuing his time. He was extremely punctual for all appointments, believing a man has no right to occupy another's man's time unnecessarily. He was strategic with his allocation of not just capital, of energy also. His daily breaks, including snacks and naps, were purposely designed to conserve energy and help him to strike an ideal balance between his physical and mental forces. He recognized it is not good to keep all the forces at tension all the time. He focused on his core business and policies. He avoided positions of honorary character that cost time and saw little value in attending non-essential board meetings, preferring to focus on his business. He worked on himself in the intricate web of admin details, dedicate more time to broad policy and decisions. He delegated philanthropy. So initially, John personally managed all charitable appeals, which became overwhelming and caused nervous tension. He prioritized finding an expert like Fred Gates, to manage his philanthropy, enabling him to handle avalanche of appeals through organized agencies. What is his, you're probably curious, what is his personal routines and habits for productivity, hacks, mindset? Well, John Sr., John D. Rockefeller, life was marked by silence, mystery, and evasion. As he spent his life camouflaged behind multiple personae and shrouded beneath layers of methodology. He was often described as an abstracted, lost in thought, and always seemed to be thinking, just like Charlie Munger. His mindset was deeply rooted in self improvement and self control. He applied himself diligently to his lessons, describing himself as a reliable rather than brilliant. He exhibited exceptional caution in games like checkers and chess, meticulously studying each move and working out every possible countermove. He would tell opponents, I'll move just as soon as I get it figured out. You don't think I'm playing to get beaten, do you? Once he thoroughly mulled over a plan, he had the power of a quick decision. He sounds like an INTJ. He strove to banish spontaneity and unpredictability from his life. That's why I said INTJ. Meticulously scrutinizing his daily activities and regulating his desires. He lived by the Protestant work ethic in its purest form, believing that activities outside of religion and business were of lesser importance. He saw wasting time, idle chatter, and luxurious diversions as grave sins, emphasizing the restraint of impulses to achieve wealth. He exhibited a reflexive habit of secrecy, a fear of the crowd, and a deep contempt for idle chatter and loose tongues that lasted a lifetime, stemming partly from his childhood with his notorious, father. His father also taught him never to trust anyone completely, not even me, and keep away from the crowd. Attend to your own business, advised the shape, and John D. guarded that nature. John D. trained himself to control his temper, which he called ugly when too far provoked, and he tried to never be guided by ego. He was a paragon of self discipline and deferred gratification, once stating, I carried a lunch in my pocket until I was a rich man. I trained myself in a school of self control and self denial. It was hard on me, but I would rather be my own tyrant than have someone else tyrannize me. Rockefeller did not see himself as a business obsessed drudge. He worked at more leisurely pace than many executives, napping daily after lunch and often losing after dinner. He even claimed his extraordinary longevity was due to him short, did his less work, live more in the open air, and enjoyed the open air, sunshine, and exercise. So by the time John was in his mid 30s, he had telegraphed a wire between home and office, allowing him to spend several afternoons at home and planting a gardening, mingling work, and rest to improve productivity. He became an evangelist for health, advisi- ab- advising to avoid hustling and go along at even pace to keep from attempting too much. His life had a clockwork regularity, which he found soothing, with each hour tightly budgeted for business, religion, family, or exercise. Despite projecting calm, he was under terrific strain and admitted to years of sleepless nights worrying about his company. He equated silence with his strength, believing that weak men had loose tongues and blabbed to reporters, while prudent businessmen kept their own counsel. His maxims included success comes from keeping the ears open and the mouth closed. In retirement, he embraced recreation with the same intensity as business. He found a genuine pleasure in games, and as his body aged, his mind grew younger. What is John D. Rockefeller's processing filter, or how does he learn? Well, he possessed a terrific head for math. He was a numbers guy. He showed a special affinity for accounting and almost mystic faith in numbers. He was monitoring the proposals, and had extraordinary reactive ability and first-rate power of judgment when presented with opinions. This made him resemble modern chief executives. He found bookkeeping delightful and had a passion for detail. It exposed fraud, okay, and ferreted out efficiencies, rooting things in solid empirical reality. He criticized rivals for not knowing their profitability. How do you run a business and not know your profitability? His success was greatly attributed to his quick head for figures, as demonstrated by his mental calculation during a negotiation that saved 30,000 in interest. He massively coordinated vast arrays of data to manage his decentralized empire. The ledger books allowed him to play a puppeteer and manipulate his empire by invisible strings, reducing varied systems to a common standard. Every cost in Standard Oil was computed to several decimal places, while he downplayed the need for scientific knowledge, stating that one could always hire scientists. He was extremely inquisitive and observant when touring facilities. He had a talent for seeing things anew, breaking down operations into component parts and devising ways to improve them, anticipating efficiency studies. This led to an atmosphere of ceaseless improvement, where even a penny saved when multiplied thousands of times across the empire resulted in significant savings. Here's an example: reducing solder drops on hands. So, in discussion, he was described as inscrutable and loath to reveal his thoughts, using long silences that could be baffling. He trained his face to be a stony mask. He had that poker face, so employees couldn't even discern his reaction to news. He learned by listening and observing. Now, the technology adoption, the tools, automation, digital transformation Rockefeller showed in his early years, okay? In his early years in business, he was fascinated with the modern technology. So as a student, he was riveted by the displays of the telegraph instrument, the galvanic batteries, and other newfangled devices. His first employer, Hewitt and Total, relied on the railroad and the telegraph technologies that were revolutionizing the American economy, which opened his eyes to business transportation. He was an innovator in refining, converting sulfuric acid residue into fertilizer, one of the many profitable attempts to create byproducts from waste. How do you turn your asset into more assets? And okay, that's a secret. That's a if that clicked in your head, then that is going to produce a lot of money for you. And building his own barrels due to shortages. He even hired his own plumber to avoid suspicious bills. Now, John D expanded beyond shipping and barrels to open flat cars and primitive tank cars to adopt single iron tanks as the industry norms for transporting oil by road. Now, all of this information, everything that I just talked about, his mental models, his decision making framework, was all from his book Titan. You can go through that thick book, 800 pages, or you can listen to this. Now, if you enjoyed, subscribe, like, comment, and hit the bell if you haven't already. Now, Andrew Carnegie is a steel magnet. He was a billionaire ahead of his time, one of the greatest entrepreneurs that ever lived, Andrew Carnegie. And I made a video about his partner, Henry Frick, which I mentioned in this video. If you want to see that video, click somewhere on the screen and stay tuned. Go out there, build your empire, build your dynasty, and see you next time.